night. Last night, while he was standing near the tree trunk, he noticed that it was covered with lots of meat. He questioned Ayan about placing good meat there, considering the village was going through a food shortage. Ayan explained that the meat was an offering to Madame Eight Legs, and they sought permission to live in that dense forest. Vikir realized the significance of Madame Eight Legs and how reckless his actions had been. He understood the Balak villagers' behavior towards her and found her to be an annoying monster. Vikir, strolling back to his hut, noticed a long line of girls waiting outside. He was puzzled, wondering if there was another ceremony or some special event. The girls talked amongst themselves, expressing their eagerness to meet Vikir. One girl mentioned that she had been in line since dawn, while another was glad to be at the front end. A third girl proudly stated that she stayed awake the entire night. 3 girls stood together, discussing the possibility of becoming a commoner based on the results of yesterday's pillage. They speculated that a woman from the village might become Vikir's wife, considering his strength in hunting an ox bear. Just then, Ayan arrived after hunting a deer and scolded the girls for trying to take what belonged to her. She reminded them that she had given him the stew the previous day, and they had no right to claim it as their own. In response, the barbarian girls argued that Ayan should have used it herself and shared some with them. They called her stingy for keeping it all to herself. Ayan, clearly irritated, challenged them to set up their own trap and catch something similar. The girls explained that they had already gone out many times, even to the Empire's border, but found no one else like Vikir. Ayan, with an angry expression, suggested that there might be someone like Vikir in hell. The barbarian girls, frightened by her anger, ran away in fear. Ayan sighed, concerned that the cunning girls might take Vikir away while he was recovering. She fed him the ox bear's meat, so she felt the need to order him to carry out his manly duties. Suddenly, Ayan noticed Vikir standing there and stuttered, trying to hide her intentions. Vikir's face distorted as he realized what he had eaten the previous day. Ayan quickly changed the topic and mentioned that she had heard that last night, her mother had called for a meeting among the elders. She added that Vikir, as the honorable hunter of the pillage, would have the opportunity to request something from her mother during the meeting. She then advised him that when her mother called upon him, he should ask for the thing she was planning to suggest. Inside the matriarch's tent, the elders sat on one side while the young prodigies on the other. Vikir sat on his knees and bowed to the matriarch, greeting her respectfully. The matriarch acknowledged Vikir's accomplishment of catching an ox bear, expressing her gratitude for the good meat she had eaten. Vikir humbly replied that he only did what he had to do. The matriarch smiled and praised him, remarking on his quick recovery rate, which he credited to her care. Vikir observed the matriarch, the night fox, Aquila. He recognized that she was a genius archer who scared the people of the empire, despite leading the Balak tribe with less than 300 members. He saw her as dignified as Hugo, but she was also warm and soft. The matriarch expressed her desire to reward him for his contributions. She announced that due to his actions the previous day, she would change his status. Vikir was no longer considered a slave but a part of the Balak family. At that moment, an elder cleared his throat, and Vikir recalled that some elders were dissatisfied with his status change. Vikir observed the elder and recognized him as Ahuman, the Balak's shaman and Ahun's grandfather. The matriarch stood up and reaffirmed Vikir's new status as an official member of the Balaks. She invited him to share his desires, stating that even though she didn't give birth to him or raise him, she would consider his request as part of the family. She offered him the possibility of choosing a beautiful village maiden as his partner, and she would give her blessing. Alternatively, if he preferred not to have a partner, she was fine with him having a slave. Meanwhile, Ayan made hand signs, reminding Vikir of something she had previously told him. Vikir looked at her and closed his eyes. Vikir then stated that he had one request. The matriarch was intrigued and encouraged him to speak comfortably. Internally, the matriarch wondered why Ayan was signaling so urgently, questioning if she wanted him that badly. Vikir looked at the matriarch with confidence and expressed his desire to bathe in the hero's spring. The room fell silent as everyone present was shocked by his request. Only Ayan had a smile on her face. The matriarch gazed at Vikir with cold eyes, clearly taken aback by his request, and questioned whether he was aware of what he was asking for. Ahuman's voice thundered as he directed his words toward Vikir, his tone dripping with disdain and anger. He questioned Vikir's awareness of the person he was in the presence of and criticized his arrogance. Shifting his attention, Ahuman then turned towards Matriarch and emphasized that only esteemed high-ranked Balak warriors were permitted to access the revered hero's spring. He dismissed Vikir's plea, branding it as insignificant. Ahan chimed in, echoing Ahuman's sentiment. He asserted that the hero's spring was exclusive to those who had proven their exceptional might and condemned Vikir for his audacious inquiry. Ayan intervened, speaking up for Vikir and highlighting his previous feat of capturing an ox bear during the pillaging ceremony. The act, according to her, was a testament to Vikir's strength. The matriarch's gaze fell upon Vikir, and she inquired about his understanding of the hero's spring. Fearless and composed, Vikir met her gaze and revealed his knowledge. He knew that Hero's Spring was a revered shrine where only the mightiest Balak warriors were submerged. The spring possessed healing properties, aiding both internal and external injuries through its waters. Vikir also recalled Ayan's insight that access to the spring was reserved for warriors who had made significant contributions. Contemplating Vikir's request, Matriarch grappled with the decision. The first elder expressed hesitation about sending an outsider, a recent commoner, to the shrine. However, the second elder interjected, suggesting that given Vikir's potential, a single visit to the hero's spring could serve as motivation. Debate ensued among the elders. The first elder emphasized the exclusivity of the hero's spring, questioning the idea of allowing anyone to enter. On the other hand, the second elder advocated for showing kindness to Vikir due to his battered state and newfound familial connection. Matriarch's internal struggle was evident as she weighed the options. She desired to grant Vikir's request but acknowledged the lack of a compelling reason. She lamented the opposition from the shaman and the guards, leaving her feeling constrained in her decision-making. As the tension grew, a sudden bell sound interrupted their deliberations, capturing everyone's attention. Vikir's voice cut through the uncertainty as he questioned the origin of the bell, pondering if it signaled the onset of war. Ayan clarified that the sound was an indication of a guest's arrival, ruling out the possibility of a confrontation with the Balaks in their own territory. Matriarch decided to adjourn the discussion, instructing everyone to return to their duties. Ahuman's demeanor shifted as he observed Matriarch's departure, his expression brimming with ire, accompanied by a disapproving sound. As the members of the Balak tribe stood together, Vikir asked Ayan if the group of people before them were the guests they were expecting. Ayan confirmed this, revealing that the newcomers were merchants who brought goods from beyond the forest. The Balak tribe eagerly anticipated their visits. However, Vikir's thoughts were elsewhere. He focused on a symbol on one of the merchants' flags, recognizing it as belonging to the bourgeois family, one of the 7 merchant families. Vikir was perplexed by their presence, considering that their route required crossing either the Baskerville or Morg family territories, both of which wouldn't likely grant such passage. Vikir mused about the possibility of the bourgeois family having found a way to smuggle themselves through. The head merchant, resembling their leader, addressed the crowd in the Balak language with a cheerful tone. He announced the arrival of the 5-day market and encouraged bartering. The merchants promptly set up their stalls and showcased their wares. One item promoted was a glass orb believed to induce sweet dreams when placed near one's bed. Another merchant drew attention to cosmetics and grains in their collection. Vikir observed the merchants' offerings with a critical eye, noting that they had brought essential goods and food that were distributed throughout the empire. He questioned the disparity in value, considering that they were trading rare forest items for seemingly mundane supplies. He speculated whether the merchants were taking advantage of the Balak's lack of knowledge about current market prices. However, Vikir decided to let the Balaks navigate this on their own to avoid drawing attention to himself. Amid the bustling market, Ayan's voice rang out in frustration, denouncing the unfairness of the deals. She questioned whether it made sense for her to exchange a diamond for corn. Vikir found solace in her reaction, relieved to see someone expressing rational dissatisfaction. Ayan's anger grew as she shouted that she should at least receive 2 corns for this. Ayan smiled as she happily received 2 corns in exchange for a diamond. Vikir couldn't help but feel frustrated by her actions, considering her to be quite hopeless. Amidst the bartering, 3 Balak tribe members engaged in a verbal confrontation with the merchant leader. The first one argued for better terms for trading a pearl clam for radishes, asserting that 2 radishes were the rightful exchange. The second haggled over the quality of cabbage and eventually settled for 1 deer antler. The merchant leader, visibly irritated, relented under the pressure of the Balak warriors' persistence, giving in and offering extra items. This made the Balak members happy, but the merchant leader smirked inwardly, perceiving their celebration as ignorance of the item's true value. Just then, a small girl approached the merchant leader, politely asking for a glass orb. The merchant leader, with a self-assured demeanor, mentioned having many glass orbs and inquired about what the girl had to offer in return. The little girl's face lit up with joy as she proudly displayed a sun larva, referring to it as a rare, delicious, and nutritious treat. She presented it to the merchant leader as an offering. However, the merchant leader's expression twisted into one of disgust as he slapped the girl's hand away, rejecting her offering with revulsion. The sun larva fell to the ground, leaving the girl heartbroken. As the merchant leader began to walk away, he remarked that despite being perceived as a primitive barbarian, she was quite pretty. He considered her attractive enough to fetch a good price as a slave. The girl looked at the sun larva with teary eyes, and suddenly a hand appeared on her head, trying to console her. Vikir looked at the merchant with anger and stated that this trade was invalid. The merchant leader questioned whether Vikir understood the imperial language and tried to brush off the incident by saying it was just a misunderstanding. However, Vikir cut him off, questioning if he was talking about the intention to sell a Balak child as a slave. Dismissing the merchant's attempts to explain, Vikir redirected the conversation and demanded the cancellation of all unfair trades of the day. The merchant leader was baffled, asking Vikir to define what he meant by unfair trades. Vikir boldly stated that the items were being marked at prices significantly divergent from their current market value. The merchant leader pondered the fact that Vikir was the only one who could speak the imperial language. Attempting to assert authority, the merchant leader claimed that the trades were sacred and sanctioned by the Balak shaman, who was seen as a proxy of the forest god. He belittled Vikir's interference due to his young age, implying that he shouldn't involve himself in matters beyond his understanding. Vikir's words were calculated and sharp as he broke down the actual market values of the items being traded. He revealed that the supposed corn was worth 100 gold each, while the received diamond had a value of around 2 million gold. He further explained the worth of an ox bear horn when crafted into a billiard ball, equivalent to 1 million gold, comparable to a goblin butt mushroom, a newly used medicinal item. The merchant leader was astonished by Vikir's precise knowledge of market prices. Vikir picked up a glass orb and explained that this glass orb can give you sweet dreams. If you place this next to you, you will certainly be engulfed and only dream sweet dreams. He then disclosed that the orb's surface contained hidden holes that dispensed drugs inducing sweet dreams, which, in reality, was a harmful, cheap substance banned in the Empire due to its adverse effects with prolonged use. He acknowledged the merchant's effective distribution of the drug. Crushing the glass orb in his hand, Vikir unveiled their scheme, leaving the merchant leader visibly rattled as their covert actions were exposed. Among the chaos, the merchant leader's friend whispered inquiries about the situation, to which he confirmed that someone had uncovered their secret. Ayan, filled with anger, questioned Vikir's previous words, seeking confirmation regarding drug, body, and harm. Vikir acknowledged her inquiry, prompting Ayan to turn her wrathful gaze toward the merchant leader. She demanded an explanation, linking the deteriorating health of many people to their actions. The merchant leader recognized the need to retreat from the situation and attempted to downplay the circumstances. However, before he could proceed, an arrow from Ayan's bow found its mark, piercing his shoulder. The merchant leader screamed in pain as Ayan fiercely accused them of fearlessly deceiving the Balaks. The merchant leader's face turned pale, his brow dripping with cold sweat as the pain from his wounded shoulder brought tears to his eyes. His response was a bitter expletive, reflecting his realization of the dire situation. The merchants swiftly mounted their horses, urgently rallying their group as they shouted to gather their belongings and escape. Vikir questioned Ayan's decision to let them go without consequences, given the merchant's reputation for avoiding losses. Ayan offered her perspective, comparing their situation to hunting techniques used on beasts in packs. Injuring and releasing them could lead them back to their group, allowing for more strategic confrontation. Meanwhile, the merchant leader, fuming with anger, continued to run, casting a final curse at the Balaks. The merchants eventually reached a camp where a group of mercenaries had set up. With frustration and desperation, the merchant leader ranted about the Balaks stealing their products and rallied the mercenaries for an impending battle. In the quiet of the night, a bird soared through the air, its keen eyes spotting a distant light cutting through the heart of the forest. Descending, the bird perched on someone's hand. Ayan's fierce gaze met the bird's arrival as it landed on her hand. She uttered a chilling declaration that resonated with the anger within her. They had provoked the Balaks, and in her eyes, there was only one way to deal with such a transgression: slaughtering their adversaries. A group of mercenaries moved silently through the dense forest toward their destination in the heart of the night. The leader of the mercenaries turned to the merchant leader accompanying them and addressed him, highlighting the unfortunate looting of his goods by the Balak group. He suggested that mere words wouldn't work with these barbaric raiders and that a more decisive approach, involving their annihilation, or enslavement was necessary. The merchant leader, however, countered that the challenge of defeating the Balaks in combat was not to be underestimated. The mercenary leader questioned his decision to hire them if he was so apprehensive, reminding him that they were initially meant to be a backup plan in case things went awry. He then lit a matchstick to ignite his cigarette and elaborated on their agreement to receive a share of the earnings in exchange for providing security, hinting at the possibility of taking spoils if the situation called for it. The merchant leader's response was a moment of silence followed by a reluctant approval of their intent. With the plan to ambush the Balaks under the cover of night and unleash a fiery attack, the mercenaries began discussing their approach. As the first mercenary passed the matchstick to his companion to light his own cigarette, a third mercenary chimed in, wanting to use the match as well. This prompted a discussion about battlefield superstitions, where it was asserted that only 2 people should share a match to prevent bad luck. Disregarding the superstition, the third mercenary confidently lit his cigarette. Suddenly, without warning, an arrow struck him in the middle of his forehead, ending his words and his life. Before the other could react, a second arrow found its mark, piercing the head of the companion who had just used the match. The mercenary leader, oblivious to this chaos, continued talking to the merchant leader about his past experiences of capturing and selling barbarians as slaves. However, his sentence was abruptly cut off as a shocking expression of fear spread across the merchant leader's face. An arrow had found its way into the mercenary leader's forehead as well, ending his tale and his life in an instant. The merchant leader urgently shouted as the Balak warriors approached, warning everyone to extinguish their cigarettes. Ayan, standing at a distance, expressed anger and a determination to target only the heads of the enemies to showcase their fearsomeness. Vikir was taken aback and questioned whether the Balak warriors could accurately shoot their arrows using just the light from the mercenaries' cigarettes. Ahan then arrived near Vikir, carrying barrels. He addressed Vikir as a slave, but Vikir corrected him, stating that he was now a commoner. Ahan brushed off his concern, implying that the distinction wasn't worth fussing over. Among the mercenaries, one individual blocked incoming arrows with a shield and issued orders for mages to gather and shield bearers to protect against the arrows. Aura users were told to prepare for a counterattack. Suddenly, a peculiar sight caught their attention. 2 arrows lodged into trees with a wooden barrel suspended between them by ropes. Soon, a barrage of similar combinations of arrows and barrels filled the sky above the mercenary's position. The mercenary exclaimed in shock, realizing that the Balaks had launched barrels containing alcohol. However, he quickly grasped another layer of the plan. But before he could react, burning arrows ignited the alcohol-filled barrels, triggering a massive explosion that engulfed the entire area. The mercenaries suffered casualties as they were engulfed in flames, and amidst the chaos, cries rang out, attributing the fire to the Balaks. Taking cover behind a tree, the merchant leader contemplated the situation with a shocked expression. He understood that the Balaks had tied ropes to the arrows, allowing them to launch oil-filled barrels. He marveled at their unexpected intelligence. Just then, a figure approached him from behind, making rustling sounds. The merchant leader turned towards the newcomer, his fear evident as he accused the person of being a meddlesome Balak. Trembling, he warned that killing him would lead to regret. Desperately, he presented a paper stamped with an official seal, claiming it to be an exploration permit issued by the newly appointed deputy consul from the underdog city. He threatened that the Baskerville family would seek retribution if he was harmed. Vikir was intrigued and questioned if the deputy consul in question was named Vikir. The merchant leader confirmed it, referring to him as the infamous Vikir. Vikir, with his red eyes, calmly replied that he didn't recall granting such a permit. The merchant leader was taken aback and noticed Vikir's changed appearance and deduced his true identity. Before he could finish his sentence, Vikir launched an arrow that swiftly ended his life. He then declared that those who forged the Baskerville seal are to be executed. Ayan arrived on her wolf, urgently shouting at Vikir to flee, addressing him as a slave. Vikir corrected her, reiterating that he was not a slave. Meanwhile, among the mercenaries, they continued to defend against incoming arrows with their shields. To their surprise, they realized that the Balaks had ceased their arrow barrage. This change in tactics led them to believe that the Balaks lacked confidence in their approach. Encouraged by this, the mercenaries resolved to pursue the retreating Balaks, expressing their intent to exact vengeance. Amidst their conversation, a sudden ominous event occurred. Something struck the area where the mercenaries were positioned. Their fear-filled cries echoed through the forest as they encountered a monstrous presence. Ayan turned her attention back to Vikir, acknowledging his strategic prowess and the utilization of fire as a tactic. She noted his transformation into a remarkable Balak. Vikir's response held a hint of humor, implying that he felt the same way whenever he saw Ayan. His gaze shifted to Madame Eightleg's menacing aura, and he remarked that the situation was a disaster. Matriarch's smile graced the scene as she granted permission for Vikir to enter the hero's spring. As she gazed at Vikir, she acknowledged his various achievements, addressing the food shortage, resolving battles without casualties using oil barrels, and uncovering the cause of the Balak warriors' infection caused by cheap drugs. The matriarch placed her hand on his shoulder and expressed her belief that he was a brave warrior. She then pointed out that tonight was a full moon, so she instructed Ayan to lead Vikir to the hero's spring. Ayan got up and responded, "Yes, mother." As they walked, Ayan playfully wrapped her arm around Vikir and commented on how Ahuman was remaining silent. She explained that Ahuman had previously attributed the warrior's ailments to a curse, and due to his actions, Ahuman's words no longer carried weight. Vikir remembered the words of the merchant leader who had spoken of the Balak shaman, the proxy of the forest god, permitting a sacred trade. Vikir gazed at Ahuman, contemplating the notion of a curse. Later that night, Vikir immersed himself in the spring, experiencing a profound sense of relaxation. He reflected on the purification of his mana, feeling his broken bones and muscles begin to heal. He recognized that the old shaman's concerns were not unfounded, given the spring's remarkable efficacy. He mused about the efficacy of the spring in comparison to the river Styx at Baskerville, acknowledging its advantage due to the absence of an age limit. Vikir gazed ahead, observing Ayan also in the hero's spring. He mentioned that the spring's efficacy might diminish if she joined him. He pointed out that the matriarch had specified that only he could enter. Ayan dismissed his concern, remarking that true Balaks didn't worry about minor details. She shifted the conversation to express gratitude to Sir Adonai for discovering the hot spring. Vikir inquired about Adonai, prompting Ayan to describe him as the sole individual capable of battling Madame Eightlegs. She emphasized that Adonai was the most formidable warrior in their legends and advised Vikir to respect him. Vikir acknowledged that if Adonai had truly confronted the monster head-on, he deserved respect. Ayan exclaimed that she was telling the truth. She then turned away and muttered her frustration about the difficulties of communicating with outsiders. She recalled her mother's words about Vikir, acknowledging his transition to a commoner, and his positive reputation within the village. Her mother had expressed that with Vikir's recovery using the hero's spring, he had the potential to become the man he was meant to be and wasn't a bad choice for a husband. Ayan blushed as she gazed at Vikir and firmly declared to herself, "Today, I'm going to make Vikir mine." Ayan spoke openly, revealing her knowledge of the merchant's excessive profits and expressing her readiness to take action against them if he hadn't. Vikir responded with a knowing smile, prompting Ayan to protest in embarrassment. She insisted that she genuinely knew about the price difference between diamonds and corn in the empire. Curious, Vikir inquired about the price disparity, and Ayan guessed that 1 diamond might be worth 20 corns. When Vikir remained silent, she quickly revised her estimate to 30 corns. Vikir remarked that her guesses were wrong, and he then revealed to her the number of corn she could get with 1 diamond. Ayan was taken aback by this revelation and exclaimed in shock at the immense number of corn she could exchange for a diamond. She quickly covered her mouth and tried to save face by dismissing her surprise, as if she had known all along. She remarked that the logic within the empire was strange and questioned where they would use that stone. Vikir told her that all that didn't matter. He then offered her a choice between addressing him by his name or as a slave. He emphasized that he didn't like keeping things ambiguous. Ayan considered her options, stood up, and moved closer to him, asking if he didn't like ambiguity. She took hold of his chin, lifting his face, and declared her desire to call him neither slave nor Vikir. She moved her face closer to his and said that what she wanted to call him was. But before she could reveal her preferred name for him, their moment was interrupted by the joyful arrival of some children who jumped into the spring. The children approached Ayan with smiles, addressing her as commander and Vikir as brother Vikir. Ayan was surprised by their sudden appearance and asked how they had managed to get there. But the children ignored her question and enthusiastically invited her to play with them. Meanwhile, Vikir wondered if it was neither his name nor slave, then how did she want to treat him? Ayan exclaimed at the children, calling them rascals and saying that if they entered the spring, its efficacy would be reduced by half. Just then, Vikir reminded her that someone had said that a true Balak wouldn't be stingy with such things. 2 children stood behind Vikir, echoed his sentiment, and playfully called her stingy. Ahan stood with the small girls and explained that it was the matriarch's command for the sick children to enter the hero's spring due to the side effects of drugs inflicted by the merchants. Ayan couldn't help but wonder if her mother had intended to make a fool out of her with this situation. Ahan, standing behind Vikir, thanked him for helping her younger sister, and her sister also expressed her gratitude. Ahan then apologized to Vikir for misunderstanding him all this time. Vikir responded with a simple yeah. Ahan shouted in frustration, stating that they were apologizing here, and questioned if that was all Vikir had to say. Vikir responded calmly, stating that Ahan had too much anger in him. Ayan smiled as she looked at Vikir and thought that there was still a lot of time. She called out to Vikir with a warm smile covering her face and cheered for him on becoming an official Balak member. About 2 years later, a punch landed squarely on Ahan's face, causing him to fall to the ground with a painful sound. As Ahan lay on the ground, his attacker, none other than the 17-year-old Vikir van Baskerville, remarked that Ahan was more of a crybaby than he had anticipated. Despite the punch, Ahan was determined and challenged him for another round. Vikir, however, began to walk away and stated that their sparring session had concluded for the day. Ahan accused him of running away, but Vikir simply replied that he was going for a stroll. After Vikir left, Ahan's 2 friends came to his aid and helped him up. Ahan expressed his frustration, describing Vikir as an annoying and monstrous opponent who had become even more formidable after recovering from his injuries. One of Ahan's friends mentioned hearing that Vikir's marksmanship had recently reached a level on par with Commander Ayan. The other friend, however, questioned the comparison, wondering how Vikir could be matched with Commander Ayan. He claimed that he could even make Ahan's nose bleed with a punch. However, Ahan surprised his friends by revealing that Vikir's punch hadn't actually hit him. It had stopped right in front of his face. The friend was shocked and asked if Vikir had made Ahan's nose bleed from the wind's pressure caused by his fist. Vikir was covered in sweat and let out a long breath. He then stated that now he could execute the 6th technique perfectly. He glanced at the wall riddled with enormous holes, proudly stating that he could now perfectly bear the 6th fang. Achieving this level at the age of 17 marked impressive progress, although he acknowledged that there was still a long way to go before mastering the 10th technique. He also possessed 6 mana circles, and with that, he could be regarded as a high-rank graduator. He contemplated the blessings of the river Styx, his demonic sword Beelzebub, and the marksmanship and assassination techniques he had acquired from Balax. With these abilities, he could go up against even the highest-ranked graduator. Vikir remarked that it had already been 2 years since he had set foot in the deep forest. He questioned whether he would be bidding farewell to the Balax once his preparations were complete. Sometime later, Vikir and Ayan were navigating through the forest when Vikir noticed a trail on the ground and identified it as the tracks of the deep forest snake, Mashasu. He emphasized that it was a large and ancient one. Ayan acknowledged this information, and Vikir mentioned that if they were able to catch this snake, it would provide enough food for the village for at least 4 days. Curious, Vikir looked at Ayan, who appeared lost in thought, and asked if she was thinking about something else while they were hunting. Ayan's face flushed, and she hastily denied it. To change the topic, she mentioned that another hunting group had asked her to inquire about something. Vikir regarded her with suspicious eyes, sensing that she might be hiding something. She then revealed a knife and explained that the hunting group had obtained it from an imperialist who had trespassed into the deep forest. She asked him if he knew anything about the emblem on the dagger. Vikir confirmed his knowledge and stated that it was a famous emblem. He knew that the emblem belonged to an extremely famous clan, the Leviathan clan, an incredibly renowned clan that was part of the 7 imperial clans, along with the Baskerville clan. Ayan explained that they had initially suspected the dagger might have belonged to someone from the mercenary group they had massacred 2 years ago. Fortunately, this was not the case. However, something was troubling her. She described how in various locations around the headwaters, they had found traces of a red liquid poured from a glass bottle, left behind by unknown individuals who quickly retreated. The hunting group had managed to capture someone, but that person had ingested a hidden poison and died, leaving behind only the dagger with the Leviathan clan emblem. Ayan hesitated for a moment and then asked Vikir a personal question, whether he wanted to return to his hometown. Vikir, taken aback by this sudden and oddly serious inquiry, asked why she was asking with such a peculiar expression. Ayan responded by expressing her dislike for secrets or lies and implored him to be honest with her. She revealed that another imperialist had recently entered the deep forest, and she believed that Vikir was their target. Vikir was visibly shocked, and Ayan closely observed his reaction. After a moment of silence, Ayan dropped a significant revelation, stating that girl had come to the deep forest. Ayan spoke honestly that 2 years ago when he had confronted Madam up until now, that girl, along with a search party, had gone to investigate the deep forests. Ayan suspected that she was searching for clues about Vikir. Ayan hesitated but eventually asked him a question that had been weighing on her mind. Would he go with this girl? Her thoughts raced as she contemplated his potential response. Would he be angry because she had kept this information hidden until now? What if he agreed to go with the girl? Should she try to prevent him from leaving by invoking the tribe's rules, or would that even work? Just then, Vikir spoke up, stating firmly that he wouldn't go back. Ayan asked if he was speaking the truth, and Vikir affirmed his decision. Her face lit up with a bright smile upon hearing his response, and she expressed her joy by hugging her wolf companion and assuring the wolf that Vikir wasn't leaving. In Vikir's mind, thoughts swirled. He believed that the Empire might not be aware of his survival. He resolved to return once he could perfectly conceal his power from Hugo without drawing any attention. He pondered Ayan's reference to that woman and whether it was Camus Morgue. He wondered if she still remembered that he had saved her life or if her interest was part of a diplomatic event. Observing how the Baskerville clan had granted permission for the Morgue search party to enter the deep forest, Vikir speculated that the alliance between the two families remained strong. He considered whether his death had played a role in forging this bond. With these thoughts in mind, he concluded that he should investigate what was happening outside the deep forest soon. As Vikir and Ayan stood by the river, a sudden, unexpected event unfolded. A massive fish leaped out of the water, leaving both of them in awe and shock. The fish landed on the ground, writhing in pain and making agonizing sounds before ultimately succumbing to its injuries, lying lifeless. Ayan, looking at the fish, questioned if it was a lungfish. She speculated that its leap out of the river might be an indicator of the upcoming rainy season. Judging by its size, she deduced that this year's rainy season could potentially be a lengthy one. However, their attention was soon diverted as Vikir noticed an arrow protruding from inside the lungfish's body. Bewildered, he examined it closely and proceeded to slice open the fish's stomach. To their astonishment, they discovered a human skeleton inside the fish, clutching the very arrow that had struck it. Ayan observed the clothing on the skeleton and wondered if it belonged to a member of the Lakoko tribe. She surmised that, since there were signs of resistance where the arrow had pierced the fish, the person inside must have put up a struggle after being eaten by the lungfish. She remarked that the lungfish was a stupid beast that ate dead things, so she found this situation a little strange. Vikir speculated that perhaps this individual had been severely weakened, to the point where the lungfish mistook them for a corpse. Ayan pondered why such a feeble person would be out hunting in the first place. Vikir suggested that the situation within that person's tribe might be dire, driving them to take such risks. He hinted at something significant occurring deep in the forest and prompted the need for an investigation. As Vikir and Ayan ventured deeper into the forest, they were met with a shocking sight that left Ayan's face contorted in disbelief. Spread before them were numerous lifeless bodies strewn across the forest floor. Ayan, horrified by the grim scene, questioned in disbelief whether all the Lakoko warriors were dead. Vikir, on the other hand, examined one of the deceased bodies and began to piece together the disturbing puzzle. He noted signs of vomiting, diarrhea, and red spots on the corpses. His thoughts raced, and he considered the possibility that this might be related to a deadly disease. Ayan pointed out another strange observation. Despite the time being well past mealtime, there were no signs of fires burning in the Lakoko village. As they continued their exploration, night descended upon the forests. Upon entering the village, Vikir couldn't help but comment on the eerie stillness. There were no signs of life, and the neglected state of the village was evident from the overgrown weeds. Ayan wondered aloud if the Lakoko tribe had relocated. But her inquiry was met with a grim discovery. As she pulled back the curtain of a tent, a swarm of flies emerged, and inside, she found a lifeless body. She urgently called out to him, saying that there was a corpse in front of her. Vikir, too, made a grim discovery on his end, confirming that there was another corpse near him. His mind raced back to a time before his regression when a deadly epidemic known as the Red Death had ravaged the deep forests. This highly contagious disease had affected both barbarians and various species alike. The symptoms of the Red Death included red spots covering the body, accompanied by vomiting, diarrhea, and excruciating pain. Those infected often became crippled and suffered a slow, agonizing death. The infection had spread so rapidly that it even crossed the Empire's border, leaving devastation in its wake. Ayan, overcome with worry, urgently suggested that they needed to leave the place immediately, considering it a curse, a god's curse. Vikir, however, tried to reassure her, stating that it was actually an infectious disease, not a curse. Ayan, still alarmed, believed this made it even more serious. Vikir attempted to calm her, explaining that the disease wasn't extremely contagious. This revelation seemed to offer Ayan some relief as she asked if it truly wasn't a curse. Vikir told her that if she was that scared, she could go back first. Ayan questioned, what if he died because he got cursed? Vikir simply stated that if he were to die, then so be it. Ayan was taken aback and exclaimed that he couldn't just decide to die on his own. Vikir concluded that judging from the number of corpses, it appeared that the entire Lakoko tribe had not been wiped out. They must have relocated elsewhere, leaving behind the deceased and the sick. He planned to gather supplies from the Lakoko barracks and advised her to proceed and find a safe place to rest. Ayan looked at him and felt that he really wasn't sensitive at all. However, just as she turned to leave, a sudden shock gripped her. She looked back in fear, and a piercing scream echoed through the forest, reaching Vikir's ears and instantly drawing his attention. Ayan lay on the ground, tears welling up in her eyes from sheer horror. When Vikir asked what was wrong, she looked ahead in fear and stated that it was the curse. She pointed at a child standing nearby and claimed that the child was cursed, urging Vikir to run away. Ayan expressed her intention to follow him if he went ahead. But then she cried out in pain, complaining of leg cramps. Ignoring Ayan's distress, he proceeded toward the child. He knelt down in front of her, observing that she didn't appear to be from the Lakoko tribe and seemed to be around 5 years old. Vikir noticed a pile of rocks with a flower nearby, suggesting that she had been mourning someone's death. Vikir gently asked the girl who she was. In response, the girl replied with 3 simple words: Lakoko, slave, and kitchen maid. Vikir concluded that she had been a slave of the Lakoko tribe. He then inquired about her name. The girl hesitated before revealing her name, Pomerian. Vikir was intrigued by her name, which sounded imperial. He wondered if she had been an imperial child captured by the Lakokos. However, his shock was palpable when Pomerian completed her name by saying, La Baskerville. Vikir questioned in disbelief what she had just said. Pomerian pointed to herself, her red eyes locked onto Vikir's, and she declared that her name was Pomerian La Baskerville. There were 3 middle names within the Baskerville clan. Van was given to those from the extended lineage. Will was given to the males from the direct lineage. The middle name given to the females from the direct lineage, although not frequently seen as most Baskervilles were males, was La. Pomerian introduced herself as Pomerian La Baskerville, which surprised Vikir. He was taken aback because he knew that there weren't many who bore the La middle name in the family. However, his attention was diverted when Ayan pointed out a pendant hanging from Pomerian's neck, which bore the symbol of Vikir's clan. Vikir caught the pendant, and Pomerian was shocked by this sudden turn of events. As Vikir opened the pendant and saw the picture inside, shock was evident on his face. He saw the picture of Hugo inside the pendant. This revelation triggered anger and confusion in him as he wondered why Hugo's image was inside the pendant and why he was there. Pomerian was visibly frightened by this sudden turn of events, and she clutched the pendant's chains in her trembling hands. Vikir, consumed by anger and bloodlust, demanded to know who these people were to her. However, Ayan intervened and told him that Pomerian wouldn't respond if he asked her like that, so she advised him to ask the question with a smile. Vikir recognized that he had been too emotionally overwhelmed to control his reactions properly. Vikir, taking Ayan's advice, looked at Pomerian and realized that she hadn't done anything wrong. Despite his initial shock and anger, he began to consider a more composed approach to understanding the situation. With a smile, Vikir gently questioned Pomerian about the people in the photo. Just then, Ayan expressed her surprise at his ability to smile. Pomerian pointed to the picture in the pendant and identified the individuals as her mother, grandmother, and grandfather. Vikir's thoughts raced as he tried to make sense of the revelation. He recalled a conversation he had with the butler Barrymore, in which he had shared a surprising revelation about the Baskerville patriarch Hugo. The butler had revealed that Hugo was once a loving family man, deeply devoted to his first wife, Roxana. Although Miss Roxana had passed away, that wasn't the reason why the patriarch had changed. The reason was that the only child of the bloodline that was conceived by the patriarch and Roxana, Miss Penelope, was kidnapped by the barbarians. Patriarch, who was desperate to find her, had taken drastic actions. He volunteered to move to the borders, and the Baskerville clan that lived in the capital moved to La Rouge-et-Lenoir Mountain, the hideout of the barbarians. Despite Hugo's relentless efforts in sending numerous hounds, there had been no news of Penelope's whereabouts. After that incident, Hugo loathed the barbarians like a madman. He became a cold, killer machine who pursued a life of massacring monsters and barbarians. Vikir had just brushed it off because he had thought it was impossible, but the proof that she was alive was right in front of him. Penelope was the daughter of the only woman whom Hugo loved, Roxana, and Penelope's daughter was Pomerian. If his speculation were correct, then Pomerian was Hugo's direct granddaughter. Vikir knew that Hugo was someone who loathed the barbarians and used his children as tools, so he couldn't help but wonder what kind of expression Hugo would make when he saw his granddaughter, who was half barbarian. Vikir gently patted Pomerian's head and offered her his support. He could tell that she hadn't been treated well by the Lakoko tribe. With a reassuring smile, he invited her to come with him. Palmyrian observed Vikir for a moment and then pointed at him, noting that her mother's hair and eyes were the same as his. Vikir acknowledged that all the Baskerville hounds tended to look alike. He also playfully referred to himself as her uncle. The word uncle seemed to resonate with Palmyrian, and she looked at her mother's grave, recalling that she had told her that if she ever saw someone with red eyes, she must follow them. Palmyrian grabbed Vikir and expressed her desire to go with him. This was the moment when the two stragglers of the Iron-Blooded Sword clan had crossed paths. The next day, Palmyrian exited the tent and asked Vikir where he was going. Vikir explained that he had a meeting to attend, called by the matriarch of the clan. Palmyrian ran toward him and stated that she